Well, so far this year, there have been more than 25,000 people killed by guns. Nearly 1,000 of those victims have been teenagers between the ages of 12 and 17. Adding to law enforcement's challenge of solving these crimes is the use of non-traceable weapons, better known as ghost guns. In 2022, the Justice Department reported that police recovered nearly 30,000 ghost guns nationwide, while more than 10,000 privately manufactured weapons have already been recovered so far this year. So joining us now to talk more about this is Steven Dettelbach. He is the director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Thanks for joining us, Director. So I think people have heard the term ghost gun. It's kind of like a blanket term for essentially guns and gun parts that don't have serial numbers on them. Ghost guns are not illegal, but you do have to be a licensed dealer to sell them, and you're supposed to do background checks. Am I correct?
Right. So ghost guns shoot people like traditional firearms. They wound people like traditional firearms. They kill people. As you pointed out, they are largely untraceable. And a lot of people are in the business of selling these ghost guns, these kits, or things that can be readily convertible to being a firearm without running background checks. Now, in the normal system that Congress has created for 5 decades in this country, federally licensed firearms dealers are the people who are supposed to be in the business of selling firearms to others. And we have all sorts of rules that federally licensed firearms dealers follow. And when people try to use technology to get around those rules so that people who the law prohibits from having firearms, whether it's because of age or whether it's because they're a felon or a criminal who doesn't want to have their firearm traced, can get them, that black market is one of the drivers of firearms violence in this country. And you mentioned the numbers. Here's one number I want people to remember. In the United States of America, right now, the #1 cause of death for our kids is firearms violence. That is a totally unacceptable and shocking situation in this country. And we, as adults, as law enforcement, as Americans, need to address it.
So here is the challenge. And just, if people are unfamiliar, there are various ways to sort of acquire a ghost gun. But literally in the commercial break, I thought I would just Google ghost gun to see if I could order one in our commercial break. And I probably could have if we just had better Wi-Fi. So it's that easy. Often these kits are sort of separate elements, but it's very easy to find, instructions online as to how to put them together, and voila, you have a gun. It's not illegal to possess it, but it is illegal to pass it on to someone else if you are not registered to do so. But can we talk a little bit about the challenge when it comes to teenagers? If people that provide these ghost gun kits are supposed to be doing background checks, how is it that they're ending up in the hands of teenagers?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that people in this country who aren't supposed to be able to buy firearms are getting them through the black market. One of them, as you mentioned, is people who are using technology to try to think they're getting around the law. They're not getting around the law. Congress said that if something is readily convertible to being a firearm, right, it is a firearm and needs to be regulated like a firearm. We at ATF and the Department of Justice issued a rule giving more definition so that it was even more clear that this was the case. And we're out there every day working with police to try and enforce these violations. So we see them all the time. But you're right that there is right now a lot of people out there who break the law. Like this isn't unique to firearms, right? We have laws against narcotics, all sorts of things, right? People try to break the law. We have to use every ounce of public safety of law that we have to try to enforce it. So one of the things we're doing is we established something called the Emerging Threats Unit at ATF. We put ghost gun coordinators in every single office at ATF. We passed the rule that I talked about before. There's a whole bunch of strategies. There's not a one single thing we can do to prevent people from trying to get around the law, but we're trying as best we can. There's 5,000 people at ATF working day and night, running toward gunfire and using every tool that Congress gives us to try to do as best we can to catch people. But it is a big problem. I talk to police chiefs all over the country, Anne-Marie, and they are just absolutely telling me everywhere that this is a huge problem that they're facing.
The kits are one thing, but what about 3D printing? And I understand not everyone's going to have access to a 3D printer, but it's easy enough now to find kind of the instructions online. How concerning is that to you?
I think, look, if people are using technology to get around the laws, that is very concerning. And the reason it's concerning is because it people who are doing this are people who don't want to have a traceable firearm many
Yeah.
times, right? They want to get it on the black market because either A, they can't pass a background check, or B, they want to do something with that firearm that they don't want it to be traced. And I'll give you an example of what it means when we can trace. The July 4th massacre a year ago in Highland Park, Illinois. The reason that person got caught before they killed again was because we were able to run an emergency trace based on the serial number of that firearm.
Hmm.
When people are using ghost guns, they're going to be getting away with horrible murders and crimes like that. It is incredibly concerning.
Just really quickly, as you mentioned, last year the Biden administration issued a rule that clarified that and receivers, these are the sort of part of the kits that people would get in the mail, that these do qualify as firearms under the Gun Control Act of 1968. There's some pushback from manufacturers, though. How do you respond to their suggestion that they're not selling firearms?
We respond in court, which is what we are doing, which is what we will continue to do. Our positions are laid out in hundreds and hundreds of pages of legal briefs. We recently filed a petition before the Supreme Court regarding one of those cases. There's lots of different courts hearing those cases. I cannot comment on those pending litigations, but it's no surprise to hear that we are very comfortable that Congress said and intended that things that were readily convertible to being a workable firearm were covered by the Gun Control Act. Those are Congress's words, readily convertible. And some of these things can be put together in no time at all, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Director Steven Dettelbach, thank you very much.
Thank you.